coming on the air with new details about that awful holiday parade scene in Wisconsin. We now know the names of the 5 people killed and who's been charged by police for driving through the parade route. But how did he get to the road in the first place? We're taking you to the scene, and we're also live in Georgia, where prosecutors are putting race front and center in the trial of 3 men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. We're going to tell you the state's final word to that nearly all-white jury. Plus, what it means for you and your money that President Biden is keeping the same guy in charge of the Federal Reserve. And the country's birth rate is getting to record lows, with new numbers showing nearly half of Gen Zers and millennials are saying they just don't want to have kids. We'll break down why in tonight's Original. Plus, a top cosmetics brand walking away from big social media sites. Fully, they are leaving the chat. No more posts, no nothing. And there's a reason they're giving up those marketing opportunities. Here's a hint: mental health. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we're starting in Waukesha, Wisconsin tonight, with police charging someone with multiple counts of intentional homicide after they say he drove his SUV through crowds of people during that holiday parade last night. 5 people are dead. Nearly 50 others were hurt, including a number of kids. And we have to warn you here, as we talk about this story, as we report on this story, you're going to see some video, and some of it is really disturbing. So here's the deal. Police say the suspect was behind the wheel of a red SUV. You see it on the left side of your screen coming up here. This is eyewitness video. That's a school band, by the way, playing right in front. Children's Wisconsin's hospital says they took in 18 kids, with 10 of them treated in the ICU. Schools are closed now for the rest of the week in the city. As for the suspect, his name is Darrell Brooks. This is his mugshot from a previous arrest. Police say he was driving away from what they're calling a domestic incident involving a knife when he drove into the parade route. They also say there's no signs this was a terror attack or any kind of possible revenge for the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict in Kenosha, which is not too far away from Waukesha, where this happened. Maura Barrett is at the scene there near, and I think more, they're remembering the victims there tonight near where you are, right?
That's right, Hallie. I'm at the vigil where they'll be remembering the 5 victims that died and the 48 more that were injured. And that's set to start just in the next hour or so with the community gathering here.
Talk to me a little bit about Darrell Brooks here, the suspect, because the Milwaukee County's DA office is coming out and saying he shouldn't have even been out of prison given his past criminal history.
Good job. Right. It's a very lengthy list of criminal violations that Darrell Brooks has accumulated here. He's been charged with 10 crimes since 1999, to give you a sense of that. And the most recent one, he was set at a bail at only $1,000. And so the Milwaukee County DA releasing in a statement saying that this was essentially too low. They said the bail recommendation in this case is not consistent with the approach of the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office towards matters involving violent crime, nor was it consistent with the risk assessment of the defendant prior to the setting of bail. And so he's run up quite the rap sheet, the most recent one involving him actually running over a woman who he has a child with. When police went to check in on her, she still had the tire marks on her pants when they went to see her. And so he's clearly a very violent person. Now the DA basically saying that he shouldn't have been out on the streets in the first place.
You look at the people, the victims here. We heard from the police chief earlier today. We know that they are older, the ones who've been killed, ranging in age from 52 to 81. We know at least 6 kids right now are in critical condition. I know you're at that vigil, but do we know anything else about how those kids in particular are doing tonight, Maura?
Well, it's really difficult, Hallie. Yeah, there's 18 kids that are in the hospital, 10 of them in the ICU. Like you said, 6 of them in critical condition. They're dealing with facial abrasions, broken bones, things of that nature, because obviously they got hit by a car. Really quick before I move on about their status, though, I do want to remember the victims that did lose their lives, like you said, ranging in ages from 52 to 81. Their names are Virginia Sorensen, Leanna Owen, Tamara Durand, Jane Coolidge, William Hospital. These were all of the older people that were at the parade that unfortunately lost their lives. And they went through a lot, both the people that passed away and are now facing some serious injuries. I wanted to hear from one witness on site about exactly what he saw went down and how violent it was.
I saw, maybe 3 people right in front of me get hit. I saw people right away run to the people that were hit and start doing CPR, and I saw people on the ground, there's blood. It was really bad.
And it's that kind of emotion we heard from witnesses all throughout the day today. And keep in mind, those children that are in the hospital now, some of them were just waiting to see Santa Claus for the first time ever this holiday parade. That it was canceled last year due to COVID. And this is a decades-long tradition here in this community. These kids and families just excited to get their holiday season started. And instead, they've been faced with this tragedy, Hallie.
Yeah, it's just incredibly difficult to talk about, to report on. Maura Barrett, thank you for being there. I know we're staying on top of this story. That suspect has his first court appearance tomorrow night, so we'll watch that too. Thanks, Maura. There's another story we're looking at tonight, the closing arguments, which they seem likely to finish up sometime in the next few hours in the case of the 3 men accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. The trial is about to go to a nearly all-white jury as early now as tomorrow in a case where the prosecution is putting race right at the center of their final pitch to the jury. These 3 men, William Roddy Bryan, Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, each charged with 9 counts, including felony murder. The prosecution is trying to punch holes in the defendant's arguments that they shot Arbery in self-defense or were trying to make a citizen's arrest. That's the prosecutor there. The defense, on the other hand, is looking to convince jurors it was reasonable for the defendants to think Arbery committed a crime by going into a house under construction, even though nothing was stolen, and that they acted in self-defense. Now, again, we're just hours away from this case.
They made their decision to attack Ahmaud Arbery in their driveways because he was a black man running down the street.
As Ahmaud Arbery is running toward Travis McMichael, he could have a gun, and he definitely has fists, and he's coming straight at him.
So the defense and the prosecution there. Somebody who's been watching all of this is Sam Brock down in Brunswick, Georgia. So, Sam, you basically had the prosecution saying, listen, they shot Arbery because he was a black man running down the street. Defense lawyers, we heard today, say Arbery was not an innocent victim. I want you to talk about how it's playing for the jury, how it seems to be. But I have to ask you, because I can hear it, what's happening behind you? Because clearly there's some action outside the courtroom tonight, too.
You have protesters right now who are marching around the courthouse. If I had to guess, Hallie, I would say it's about 50 to 70 people, primarily members of the new Black Panther Party. This has been going on for a little while now, and we have some breaking news for you as well. We just found out, as you were tossing to me a second ago, they are going to break for the day. Initially, the thought was the prosecutor would go ahead with a 2-hour rebuttal. Yeah, she said, look, I'm going to need the whole 2 hours for this. It's not going to be over in an hour. And so the thought process was initially that the jury might hear that out today, but now it's actually going to be postponed until tomorrow, with the earliest deliberations could begin tomorrow afternoon, presumably.
Okay, so that lays out a bit of the timeline here, Sam, because you're right. We thought maybe they'd try to wrap up tonight. These closing arguments have been going on for a while. Again, 3 defendants, the various defense attorneys, the prosecutor gets the rebuttal, as you're talking about. Tell me a little bit about the tea leaves that you're reading from the jury here. Is there anything that you are hearing or seeing as both of these sides are making their cases in these closings?
Well, you talked about race, and certainly it's inextricably tied to this case when you have 3 white defendants who are accused of murdering an African American. To expound upon that just a little bit further, there was a comment made in court today, because that narrative of race is being continued in the courtroom as well. There was a comment from the attorney of Gregory McMichael, who said that to understand why Ahmaud Arbery is not a victim, she said, you need to understand the reality of why he came to Satilla Shores in the first place in his khaki shorts and with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails. Those were real words that were said inside of that courtroom today, and the mother for Ahmaud Arbery, you could hear her exclaim, wow, and she briefly left the courtroom and then came back. Now, what kind of impact is that going to have on a jury of 11 white jurors and 1 African American? I mean, certainly you can't look at it through the prism of just if you're white or black. You're going to understand the gravity of the racial overtones here. But you would have to imagine that comments like that do sink in. Will it be enough to sway the jury one way or the other? I mean, we're going to find out very soon.
And I think, too, about one of the defense attorneys who we've talked a lot about, Sam, in our coverage of this trial, the objection, for example, to black pastors being in the courtroom. Same defense attorney talked about a woke left mob influencing the jury, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like that is also sort of inextricably linked to even some of what we're seeing outside the courtroom now with those protests tonight.
Yes, and I think the conversation in light of Kyle Rittenhouse as well, and this whole notion of vigilante behavior and whether or not you have the right to defend property or defend your community when it also involves bringing armed weapons into a situation where the other people are not armed, and is their privilege afforded to white defendants in that case? I mean, that's the tie that brings all of this together.
Right.
And certainly we're seeing that right now. What you would hear, in fact, from the attorneys here is that the defendants in this case had to bring the weapons because they felt unsafe and they had seen Ahmaud Arbery, they claim, late at night before and felt unsafe. But that hasn't been factually corroborated with any evidence presented in court.
Sam Brock, apparently stand on this story for us again tomorrow. Sam, we know for sure, now that we know those closing arguments will continue into another day. Sam, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate you, friend. So it's not just that trial we're covering. You know that a lot of people have had something to say ever since Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted on Friday in his trial. Acquitted for shooting 3 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Well, tonight, we hear from Rittenhouse himself. Here's a little bit of what you can expect.
This case has nothing to do with race. It never had anything to do with race. It had to do with the right to self-defense.
Right.
I'm not a racist person. I support the BLM movement. I support peacefully demonstrating. And I believe there needs to be change. I believe there's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, not just in my case, but in other cases.
Okay, so that's Kyle Rittenhouse talking with Tucker Carlson, an opinion host over on Fox News. Fox had their cameras follow the teen throughout this trial. And we should note here, the Rittenhouse's attorney said after the acquittal, he didn't approve of the film crew watching all the ins and outs and maneuverings and being there. Danny Savalos is with me now to get into all of this. So, Danny, there's a lot of people who obviously were watching the Rittenhouse trial. We talked many times, Danny, about how that was really a prism for how folks saw issues related to, you know, guns, race, protests in America. You heard Rittenhouse there say that he thinks there's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct, in his words, not just in his case, but in others. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm a defense attorney, so yes, I think it is a fair assessment that there is, I wouldn't say as much prosecutorial misconduct, but a little too much prosecutorial zeal and a little too much committing to a case early on before the facts are developed and getting tunnel vision and continuing on that path, even in light of facts that may make a conviction unlikely. And even if the prosecutors believed in Rittenhouse's case, there were indisputably facts that arose that weakened their case throughout and was demonstrated even during trial when they had to rely on new evidence that appeared mid-trial in the form of photographs.
You heard Rittenhouse defend himself, say that he is not racist in that soundbite that we just released, or that Fox has released, that we're airing now. Fox was filming during the trial. You've got Rittenhouse in this interview. Is there any risk to him? Like, is he risking anything by doing this and by being so public now after the acquittal?
Yes, but lawyers are super risk averse. I mean, to me, him going out and speaking is a risky thing to do. The far less risky thing is to go home, move somewhere else, away from this controversy, and wait for it to blow over. But, you know, I understand that for an 18-year-old kid who is now the belle of the conservative ball, that it may be tempting. He's got offers coming in from all over, and he's getting a lot of positive attention, whereas for the last year and a half, it's been mostly negative attention. So while I would give him the same advice his criminal defense attorney did, to lay low, I also expect he would not follow it.
Danny, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it. Right now, President Biden and the First Lady are on their way to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. That's them getting ready to go. They're heading for a Friendsgiving with troops and their families. But before the holiday celebrations, a little bit of business. With the president ending weeks of speculation, he's announcing he will renominate Jerome Powell as chair of the Federal Reserve. And this is important, right? Especially right now, when even the president's top cabinet officials are acknowledging how you and me and everybody are feeling higher prices from the gas pump to the checkout line. The Fed is in charge of washing and containing that inflation we've been talking about and keeping banks up and running. This includes your 401ks, your savings accounts, the money that you have in the markets. But the pick, listen, a little bit controversial, with even inside President Biden's own party, progressive Democrats not too thrilled about it. Let me bring in Mike Memoli, who's joining us live now from the White House. Mike, let me just real talk you here. Let's just plain English it for a second here, right? Like, why should people care? Why should people who aren't, you know, economic reporters care that Jay Powell is going to remain the Fed chair? How does this affect my life?
Yeah, Hallie, it's a good question, because when you think about what's the biggest political headwind this White House is facing right now, it's inflation, it's higher prices. That's what we hear the most about from Republicans right now. And if you talk to White House officials and they're given a little bit of truth serum, they'll acknowledge that a president really has only so many tools at his disposal, things he can do directly to try to deal with inflation. It's a very different story when you're talking about the Federal Reserve and the chairman of the Federal Reserve specifically. And that's why this is such an important decision. You can look at what Powell has done as the Fed chair in the pandemic. When the economy took a real hit, he initiated a policy on the part of the Fed to buy $120 billion a month in mortgage and interest securities to try to keep money flowing in the economy. And now, as inflation is now the biggest concern, you're seeing the Fed already deciding to taper those monthly purchases back. The next step will be to potentially raise interest rates, which are at an all-time low right now. And so what the president ultimately decided was that the person who helped orchestrate the policy that he credited, the president did today, with keeping the economy going during the pandemic, should be the same person who now has to work that very delicate balancing act of unwinding it and dealing with interest rates. It's such a difficult job, and that's why the number one word you heard today at the White House was stability, another word, continuity as well.
You're about to hear a couple of those words. Listen to what the president had to say.
When our country was hemorrhaging jobs last year and there was panic in our financial markets, Jay's steady and decisive leadership helped to stabilize markets and put our economy on track to a robust recovery.
And this is the whole argument, Mike, that the president's been trying to make. He said at one point, like, this isn't about fresh blood. We don't need fresh blood or want that right now. We want a steadying and stable hand. That's the argument around it. But here's the deal. As you know, a nomination means this isn't it for the Fed chair. It's got to go to the Senate. So things could be a little tricky on that front.
Yeah, and this really puts the president in some ways against members of his own party and actually against his own vice president. You look back to 2018, we have to remind folks that it was Donald Trump, President Trump, who first nominated Powell to this position. And Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, among progressives, led the charge against him. Biden pointed out today that Powell got 84 votes in the Senate to confirm him. Who was one of those votes who voted against him? Vice President Kamala Harris, who, of course, was in the Senate at the time. And so progressives not happy with this, although not all progressives. We did hear, for instance, from Pramila Jayapal. She's the chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House. She applauded this decision because there are some assurances the president got during this whole process, especially about things like using the Fed's powers to deal with issues like climate change that were reassuring to progressives. And Lael Brainerd, who was also nominated as the vice chair of the Fed, that is also being cheered by progressives as well. So a balancing act. The president ultimately, though, sought a smooth confirmation pass, knowing he had enough Democrats and enough Republicans to ensure that Powell will go through again.
Mike Memley live for us at the White House. Mike, thanks for kicking us off with some news from the White House on a Monday. By the way, slow holiday week for President Biden, right? Like he goes and relaxes a little bit?
I wish I was invited to that Friendsgiving, but he's got a lot on his plate, for sure.
You can come to my Friendsgiving. Thanks, Mem. Appreciate you. Other news tonight from a little further north up in New York. Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, remember him? He was forced to resign after a bunch of scandals. He's back in the news today because of this new independent report from the State Assembly. And it found that there is, quote, overwhelming evidence that Cuomo engaged in sexual harassment. It also says Cuomo misused state resources for his book and that he was not transparent about COVID nursing homes deaths. Cuomo's lawyer says the Assembly, quote, simply parrots the Attorney General's flawed report, which she calls a one-sided, biased investigation. We're also going to have some more stories coming up after the break, including videos now coming up of Feng Shui. You know her, the Chinese tennis star we've been talking about, who just disappeared after accusing a former Communist Party official of sexual assault. Now, she's in some new videos, but the Women's Tennis Association isn't really buying that she's okay. We've got a live report from inside China after the break. So, you know, we've been following the bizarre, you could call it, really the only word for it, twists and turns in this case of the Chinese tennis star who accused a former Chinese vice premier of sexual assault. Well, tonight, there is a huge twist in this thing. After going missing for more than 2 weeks, Feng Shui, look at this. She's apparently now all over the place. She's in a few different spots this weekend, from a kids' tennis tournament to a restaurant for dinner. The president of the International Olympic Committee even says she told him she's safe during this 30-minute video chat. She's smiling. So can we believe everything we're seeing? I don't know. Does Janice Mackey-Freyer? She's live for us in Beijing. Janice, here's the question, right? We're seeing these pictures. We're seeing these videos. It seems to be good news that Feng Shui is alive and seems to be well. But is this real? What do we actually know?
Well, Hallie, there's certainly a question of whether the videos are believable. And on that, there is deep skepticism. Look, they were circulated via select Twitter accounts attached to state media employees. The videos are undated. They're unverified. In them, we see Feng Shui, but we don't actually hear from her. So it's not possible for the people who are concerned for her safety and well-being to rightly know if she can speak freely about her well-being or the allegations. We spoke with the forensic video expert to get his take. He says typically he wants to see more.
We know. That's so interesting, Janice.
I don't think at this day and age that posting anything on a social network means anything. Somebody can hack into her account. Somebody can coerce a person to get his username or the username and password to post something. Media can be easily generated now, whether it is a deep fake or not. So quite frankly, at this day and age, the only way I can actually verify the well-being of a person is actually seeing that person in real life in a press conference.
Okay, so real life in a press conference, that obviously hasn't happened yet. What we do know is that we're hearing from the Women's Tennis Association. We know, Janice, that they've been super vocal about this, right? And now there's a new statement from them, too.
Yeah. Well, the WTA said that they want to hear from her directly, and they haven't been able to reach her even after her video call with the IOC. The Women's Tennis Association, as we know, says it's willing to walk away from hundreds of millions of dollars over this. They will boycott China and pull all of its tournaments. They've released a statement saying that it's nice and positive to see Feng Shui, but they still don't know if she's fine. That video alone is, quote, insufficient. It also creates this very awkward situation now between the WTA and the IOC, which had been coming under the microscope to pressure Chinese authorities to guarantee that Feng Shui is safe. And the IOC releasing a statement saying Peng said she's well, but nowhere in that statement do they mention the sexual assault allegations or the reason why people are concerned for her in the first place.
How about, Janice, one of the things that you and I have talked about on this show is the idea of censorship, which we know happens where you are in China. Are people talking about Feng Shui's reappearance today where you are in Beijing?
No. No, this is not a story that is being for domestic consumption by any means. There's barely a whisper of it on the news here, and Feng Shui has been largely scrubbed from China's internet. This is one of China's most praised athletes, and she barely exists anymore. Chinese officials are not talking about it. There seems to be this effort to try and address the situation, address what is now a scandal at the international level outside of China, but inside of China, for several reasons, nobody's talking about it, Hallie.
Janice Mackey-Fryer live for us there in Beijing. I appreciate you being on with us tonight, Janice. Thank you. Today, deadline day for federal workers to get vaccinated, and that includes TSA employees. What we're now hearing from the agency about what that mandate means for your holiday travel plans, and the open letter to Justin Bieber, pushing him to cancel an upcoming show in the name of human rights. It's one of our 5 things. Austria is in full lockdown today because of COVID. But before the lockdown happened, protesters made clear they are not happy about it. We've got our Claudio Lavagna live from Europe in a minute. But first, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen. He is a free man today. His home arrest is over. His home confinement is over after that 3-year sentence for tax fraud, lying to Congress, and campaign finance violations. Cohen says he wants to keep helping law enforcement investigate former President Trump. Number 2, 2 of those 17 missionaries kidnapped by a Haitian gang while doing aid work in the country last month are heading home. The Christian Aid Ministries says the 2 who were released are in good spirits and their hearts are with the 15 others still being held. Number 3, the fiancé of murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi is calling on Justin Bieber to cancel his concert in Saudi Arabia next month. In a new op-ed in the Washington Post, she says Bieber should actually use this opportunity to condemn the Crown Prince, who was implicated by U.S. intelligence in Khashoggi's murder in 2018. Number 4, Team Trans, which is believed to be the first all-transgender sports team in the country, back playing ice hockey after taking time off because of the pandemic. Check this out. The team reunited this weekend for that 2-day tournament in Wisconsin. And hey, undefeated in 6 games. Not bad. Number 5, BTS stands everywhere celebrating. Why? Because the K-pop group won big at the American Music Awards last night. They got Artist of the Year. They beat out Taylor Swift and Drake and Ariana Grande. They were also named Favorite Pop Group and won Best Pop Song for their summer hit, Butter. Today, deadline day for TSA workers and other federal employees to be vaccinated. The White House COVID-19 response team just wrapped up talking about some of these numbers. And here's what we know. So far, 90% of these federal workers have already gotten at least one shot. And the administration thinks it'll be 95% plus once all the documentation actually comes in. The number for TSA workers, 93%, with the agency saying, hey, this vaccine mandate is not going to affect holiday travel. Our Tom Costello is joining us here from Atlanta. Tom, it's great to see you on the show. Thank you. So listen, pretty good news, right, that the TSA is saying, hey, our people got the shots. You're not going to be dealing with long lines because they won't be able to be on the job, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, keep in mind that the TSA has said all along that they did expect that they would have pretty much a full workforce able to handle the holiday rush. 93% vaccination rate is what they estimate right now. They've also made the point, Hallie, that does not mean 7% of the TSA officers are off the job. Not at all. That does mean a certain percentage have requested a medical exemption or a religious exemption. And because these are government workers, nothing happens quick. It would take weeks or months to actually dismiss them if, in fact, it were to go that way.
That's a really important point. What have you seen as you've been at the airport? I mean, folks who know NBC News know that you're, you know, this is your beat. You're our transportation guy. Like, what's the vibe?
Well, listen, it's been a very busy day. I think we're very fortunate because we've had very limited weather impact today. We've had a little bit of rain, a little bit of wind in the Miami area up along the East Coast. But for the most part, you couldn't ask for a better day to travel. They're expecting that we are at record levels, pandemic record levels of people flying right now, about 2.2 million. And that is definitely stressing the system. But the airlines insist after those meltdowns we saw in September and October, Southwest, American, and Spirit, they all insist that they're flying at full capacity, if you will, and that they will not have a meltdown. But the eyes of the country are on the airlines right now.
No kidding, especially, Tom, I think it's so important, as you point out, busiest holiday season, you know, busiest holiday travel since the pandemic started. Let me ask you really quickly, we know the TSA looks out for things like guns in your carry-on bag, stuff you're not supposed to have. And then there's still this thing from Atlanta where you are, police searching for this man whose gun went off during a TSA screening. Where is that investigation?
Yeah, this happened on Saturday at 1:30 in the afternoon. A gentleman came in. He had a gun in a carry-on bag. He put it into the TSA checkpoint. They spotted it. He lunged for the bag. It discharged. He grabbed the gun and took off running. They haven't seen him since. They know that he is a known felon in the Atlanta area. Thankfully, nobody was injured when that gun discharged, but it caused mass chaos, as you would expect. People were running and screaming, and the the airport was pretty much shut down for the better part of a couple of hours before it got back up to normal. Completely normal operations now. We just checked with Atlanta PD. They are still looking for the suspect. His name is Kenny Wells, 42 years old, and they say that he's known well. By the way, you hear the police dog in the background, so the police are very much on the job here,
Didn't know if it was like a police dog or maybe a support animal or what. Tom Costello, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us from Atlanta. Thanks. So COVID, as we're talking about, is getting so bad in Europe that overseas now, that is the epicenter of the pandemic. In Austria, their lockdown starts today. Bars, restaurants, shops, closed, except for anything essential, you know, grocery stores or pharmacies or whatever. A third of Austrians are not vaccinated, but the shot is going to be mandatory there starting in February. And it's not just Austria. You're seeing new restrictions in Germany, Northern Ireland, and France. And not everybody's happy about it. People over the weekend, look at this, getting out in the streets, fighting police in some instances over these new COVID lockdowns. Across the Netherlands, you saw those clashes with protesters and police, those demonstrators setting fires, throwing rocks. About 40,000 people crowded Vienna on Saturday. Big protests in Italy and Germany, too. Our Claudio Lavagna joins us now from Italy, from Rome. So, Claudio, day one of the lockdown over in Austria, and we think this is going to last, what, maybe as long as 3 weeks?
Will last at least until the 12th of December. But if cases do not go down, then it will last another 10 days. So it could be about 20 days, about 3 weeks. Well, the point here is that the authorities decided to put the whole nation on lockdown because cases are skyrocketing in Austria. As you said, a third of the population is not vaccinated. Austria has one of the lowest vaccination rates in Europe with 66%. It's stuck at 66%, and the authorities hope that the latest lockdown will also convince people to get out to get that jab, because to get out to get a vaccination is one of the reasons that people are allowed to actually go out. As you mentioned, one of the new things here, nothing new about the lockdown, but a new thing here is that Austria will make it mandatory for people to get vaccinated starting from next February, which begs the question, will it be the only country or will other countries follow?
Well, when you look at other countries that follow, I know it feels like maybe Germany could be next as far as it relates to a lockdown this fall. A lot of new rules just came out in Germany. What's your sense of what's happening there?
Well, if you think about what the German health minister said today, the German health minister said, well, by the end of the winter, in Germany, we'll all either be vaccinated or we'll recover from COVID or we'll all be dead. Essentially, what he's trying to say is that people should rush to get vaccinated because it is dangerous, because the fourth wave is upon us. Germany is feeling it, is feeling the wave, as the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, said that the fourth wave is hitting Germany with full force. That are skyrocketing. The new cases there are skyrocketing as well. So Germany is trying its best to increase the vaccination rate as well. Which is stuck, once again, at 68%. Right. Pretty low. Now, they are also introducing new rules, meaning that the unvaccinated will not be able to get into public places like pubs and restaurants, which is also what is fostering tensions, not only in Germany, but in the rest of Europe as well. Hallie.
Really quickly, Claudio, here, we've seen those images, right? The video, the protesters, the demonstrations that are happening. What is it that they want to see? Just fewer restrictions? They don't want to be entering lockdown, I assume?
Well, essentially, yes, they feel like they're being marginalized because if you think about it, most of the protesters, the large majority, if not all of them, are those who are not vaccinated because they are the ones who are being targeted by the new rules. Until today, just to give you a sense, until recently in Italy, as in the rest of Europe, in Germany, in Austria, you could get into public places if you had a COVID pass. How do you get a COVID pass? Until now, it was either are you vaccinated or you recovered recently from COVID, or you can get, if you're unvaccinated, you could get a negative test that will allow you to get into public places for the next 48 hours. Well, that is now being struck off. Now, unvaccinated, they cannot get into public places anymore, and that's what is making them angry, Hallie.
Claudio Lavagna live for us there from Rome. Claudio, great to see you. Thank you very much for being up late for us tonight on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Imagine you're out shopping and a group of people just start robbing the place. That's what happened a bunch of times this weekend in the Bay Area, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. NBC's Steve Patterson has that story.
This holiday season, a cloud of fear hanging over the Bay Area after consecutive nights of broken glass and stolen goods haunts some of the area's most posh shopping districts.
Get on the sidewalk!
The spree started Friday night in San Francisco's Union Square. A swarm of vandals and looters targeted high-end stores like Louis Vuitton, Fendi, and Hermes. Witnesses posted videos of bag-toting thieves fanning out from caved-in windows. Police flooded in, attempting to pick off perpetrators as they fled. One video shows officers bashing in a car, then making an arrest after dragging a man from the vehicle. In all, 9 stores were hit. Police say at least 8 people arrested so far, with several weapons and thousands of dollars in merchandise recovered.
This was not unplanned. Their plan was to overwhelm us. Their plan was hoping that we wouldn't be here, but we were.
The next night, a massive flash mob surged through this Nordstrom's in nearby Walnut Creek. Law enforcement officials calling the attack well organized.
I saw people running down the street. I probably saw 50 to 80 people in like ski masks, crowbars, like a bunch of weapons.
Police closing in as thieves rushed with high-priced goods to waiting getaway cars. Some stopped by officers with guns drawn. On Sunday, Walnut Creek police hinted at more coordination, saying they were actively monitoring intelligence that indicates a group of thieves who stole from the Broadway Plaza Nordstrom last night are considering similar activity later today.
It was sporadic. They had lookouts. There were signals. We've seen it go in spurts.
and then we'd make arrests, and then we'd see it die down, and then we'd see it pop back up again.
Later that night, more chaos. This time, a group of about 30 thieves and looters struck at the Southland Mall in Hayward.
We can't continue to allow people to freely flow in and out of this city, commit these acts, and get away with it.
Tonight, shopping districts across the country on high alert after similar incidents broke out, including another smash and grab on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, and this stunning video from a Louis Vuitton in suburban Chicago, showing masked thieves bursting into the store in broad daylight, swiping merchandise and running away. Police say at least 14 suspects escaped in 3 separate vehicles. A holiday crime spree, hitting stores at the height of their most important season.
They have been armed, so the idea that anybody should be a hero over a $1,000 high fashion bag doesn't make sense at all.
Ooh, is that good advice or what, Steve? Don't be a hero. Like, don't do it, right? But you look at what we're seeing here. That is dramatic stuff. This is not sophisticated. This is smash and grab. They call it that for a reason. But I think people ask, like, what are police doing? I assume that they're beefing up their presence around these places. What else are they doing to try to stop this?
Really dramatic, really scary stuff. Exactly as you say, Hallie, they're flooding the zone, a heavy police presence in those areas that were hidden out, all of these high fashion shopping districts. Of course, police are looking into ties, whether or not this was sort of a gang of thieves going from location to location to location, or if it was a series of copycat crimes repeated over this weekend. Of course, police are saying because of social media, crooks get the idea, they see it on social media, and then they try to replicate it because they see that it works. So one thing to keep in mind, if this does happen, all of these crimes have happened in less than about 3 minutes. And of course, the advice there, do not be a hero. $1,000 fashion bag is not worth your life.
Totally not worth it. Totally not worth it. Steve Patterson, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes back on the stand in her fraud trial. What she has to say in her own words and body language today. And a huge pileup in California caused not by cars, but by cash. What might happen now to the people who followed the money? So, you know, the pandemic created a lot of chaos in a lot of our lives and forced people to make some choices about what we all want our futures to look like. And for more and more people, apparently, that future does not include having kids. We've got more in our original tonight on why that is. But first, NBC covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our political unit, a candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania suspending his campaign after losing a custody battle for his kids. Sean Parnell was endorsed by former President Trump. Parnell's estranged wife had testified he was abusive to her and occasionally the kids. Parnell says he strongly disagrees with the court's ruling, but a lot of politicos are watching that one because of the implications for Senate control. From our West Coast desk, the California Highway Patrol and the FBI are investigating after an armored truck made it rain on a freeway in Carlsbad. Drivers saw money falling out of the truck. They followed the money, and then a lot of them got out of their cars to pick up that money. Police now say people have to return that money or they could face criminal charges. Good luck with that. And from the East Coast, treatment for Tiger King. Remember him, Joseph Maldonado? Well, he's getting transferred to a medical facility in North Carolina for federal inmates. Maldonado has prostate cancer while in prison, and his attorney says prison medical care, quote, isn't the best. We've also got some breaking news from Capitol Hill to bring you now. The committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol, just within the last few minutes here, is issuing subpoenas to 5 more allies of former President Trump. And these include names that you probably know. Roger Stone, remember him? He's a longtime Republican political operative. How about Alex Jones? Conspiracy theorist, far-right media personality, they've been subpoenaed. A current Trump spokesperson and 2 people who were big players in the Stop the Steal movement have also been subpoenaed by that committee. We'll follow on that story. And another one, of course, that's happening. This big trial happening out west that people in Silicon Valley are like eyeballing big time. This is the trial of Elizabeth Holmes, who founded a blood testing startup called Theranos. It failed. Now she's taken the stand in her own defense. She's facing these fraud charges as prosecutors are trying to argue she stole more than $700 million from investors by selling a lie. She's facing 11 of these federal fraud charges. And if she's found guilty, if she's convicted, she could end up in prison for up to 20 years. Kristen Dahlgren is following the case for us. Kristen, it's great to see you. And listen, I think people know Elizabeth Holmes, like that classic, black turtleneck. She's got a very distinctive voice. There was this hugely popular podcast about Theranos and what she did. And now here she is, kind of frankly, a tech celebrity. She's on the stand in her own defense.
Right. I mean, just to put it in perspective, this company was valued at $9 billion at one point. She was on the cover of magazines, this youngest self-made billionaire. Mm-hmm. So she was a really big deal. She had Henry Kissinger on the board. She had investors like the Walton family. I mean, there were a lot of really smart and really wealthy people who were behind her. So yeah, the technology failed, the company failed, and now there is this trial. And so what many people might say is a risky defense, but her lawyers apparently think that, look, this is a woman who is very good at talking in front of people, and she's been able to charm a lot of people in the past. And so their hope, of course, that she'll be able to charm the jury as well. So today, really what their line of questioning was, and what Elizabeth Holmes was talking about, was that she couldn't have intended to defraud people because she really believed that this technology worked. She said she thought it was a big idea and that the lab results were excellent, and that she was getting feedback from scientists that had her really excited about this technology and what it could do.
What's interesting, Kristen, when you talk about what her supporters describe as her charm, her critics, I think, characterize some of that as manipulation, right? Talk about her testimony and the jury reaction here.
Right. And there's a lot of talk about Elizabeth Holmes and how she sort of remade herself. You mentioned the black turtlenecks, a la Steve Jobs, that she always wore when she was on the cover of magazines and when she went to work every day. Now you see her, she's got the long flowing hair. In court, she's changed her look a little bit. She's a new mom. She comes every day with her own mother and her partner. And so, she's clearly trying to sort of present herself as a sympathetic character now. As things were wrapping up today, she tried to make eye contact with all of the jurors in the courtroom, and she has done that throughout the trial, really trying to have this connection with the jurors. A lot of them, though, today didn't look up, didn't make eye contact with her.
That's interesting. It is, listen, blockbuster trial in Silicon Valley for sure, and you're covering all of it for us. Kristen Dahlgren. Kristen, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
You bet.
In tonight's Original, a story you'll only see here, we're looking at that new poll showing more and more Americans say they're ready to tap out of the whole kids thing. 44% of people ages 18 to 49, so that's Gen Z and Millennial and then younger Gen Xers who are not parents, say they're not likely to have children at all, ever. This is according to Pew Research. Look, that's nearly half of them, right? 44%, which may help explain why the population of this country is growing at the slowest rate in the last decade since the Great Depression. And listen, no judgment, right? Whether you want to have kids or not, this is such an intensely personal thing. But since so many more people are now saying they're deciding not to, we figured let's find out why. Zincle Esenwa has more.
I asked myself, do I want to have kids? And I came to the conclusion that no, that's not what I want.
Today, many Americans agree. For the sixth straight year, U.S. birth rates dropped, according to Pew Research Center.
44% of U.S. adults ages 18 to 49 who don't already have children, so that they think it's unlikely that they will ever have children someday.
Pew says this year, only 26% of non-parents 18 to 49 said they are very likely to have kids. That's down from 32% in 2018.
A lot of people are saying that they are not going to have children or not going to have more children just because they don't want to.
Though data show no difference in response based on gender. Marcella, a child-free influencer, is one of those people.
I don't have a desire. I don't think that it would be fair to me, the child, to a future spouse, to have this kid.
Others, like Emily Dux and her husband, share different reasons.
It's expensive to have a child. It's a challenging job. I would say it's probably one of the hardest jobs we as humans can have. And that's something that we're not ready to tackle at this point in our lives.
With experts saying parenting today presents big challenges.
There is a shortage of childcare provision. Women are more fully engaged in the labor force. And on top of that, we have, of course, the effect of COVID itself, which is dramatically diminished access to health care and all kinds of other factors.
In 2020, the U.S.'s population grew at the second slowest rate for any 10-year period ever, according to the Census Bureau.
What is the risk for industrialized nations?
Because so many social institutions and economic institutions depend on a steady flow of young people into them, it has effects that will ripple up through the whole economic system.
The U.S. isn't alone, as Japan and European countries also grapple with lower birth rates.
We need to see the economy improve. We need to have better access to childcare. We need to have more flexible work arrangements.
Today, Biden's Build Back Better bill includes funding for paid family and medical leave. But experts like Johnson say more is needed as singles and couples maintain their stance to have less or no kids.
And who knows, we might change our minds someday. It's our lives, it's our decision.
Just for anybody who is questioning or who's on the fence or people who are just like, man, I don't know what I should do. Should I have kids? Should I not have kids? I always say that this is your life.
Listen, that's good advice for life. Zinkley is with us now, by the way.
Hello.
In person, it's lovely to see you. Listen, that's a really interesting point that she makes. Marcella, right?
Yes.
She's this child-free influencer. She's built this community. And there are communities of people who are like, just like there's new mom communities, there's also people who say, I'm good. And like, that's okay. And again, no judgment on that front.
Absolutely. And they say it's a liberating thing. I think that's the biggest notable part, that they're not just saying we're childless, we're child-free. This is a choice, and we find it a liberating one. And that's something Marcella really drove home, that it's been an empowering thing to find this online community.
And that sounds like semantics, but words are so important. Childless versus child-free, there's a difference in that.
Absolutely.
You also talk to people, and I know you see it in some of the numbers, climate change is a factor here.
Yes. So we've heard from so many environmental activists saying part of why I'm not having a child is because it's not a sustainable thing. So the reasons are multifold. It's economics, it's the environment. And I heard from a sociologist, Kenneth Johnson, who even said a few years ago, 5 states had more deaths than births. Now that's almost around 25 states. And so this is something we're going to have to follow closely, Hallie.
Sinclair S. and Watts, great to see you. Great to have you on set. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We got more for you coming up in the show, including that big-time cosmetics brand. You know Lush? They sell makeup and bath bombs. Well, now they're scrubbing something else altogether. Their social media presence. We'll tell you why. If you forget some last-minute thing for Thanksgiving dinner Thursday, no Target run for you, not even an option, because all Target stores are going to close this year. And every year from now on, they say, the store started opening up on Thanksgiving about a decade ago to compete with Amazon and other places where folks got a jump start on Black Friday shopping online. But the company took some flack for making employees work on a holiday. Speaking of companies, let's talk about Lush, right? They make cosmetics, they make bath stuff, and they are quitting social media, all of it. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Why? They're doing it because they want people to start talking about the impact of social media on mental health. They're deactivating their accounts on Friday, and you know that's typically a huge shopping day. Now, they will stay on Twitter for like customer service stuff. They're also going to post on YouTube. Lush's CEO says he spent his life, quote, avoiding putting harmful ingredients in products, but that there's overwhelming evidence we are being put at risk when using social media. The company's been outspoken on other issues like Black Lives Matter, sustainability, and animal rights. But this is an interesting step for them. Callan Rosenblatt is here to talk about this one. Hey, Callan, good to see you.
Hey, Hallie, thanks for having me.
Lush is huge. Lush has 900 stores around the world, millions of followers across these platforms. They're giving up potentially these big marketing opportunities because they want to shine a light on mental health. That could be a fairly risky bet for them, right?
It is a risky bet. I mean, they attempted to do this pre-pandemic, but when your whole customer base has to go indoors and can't go shopping, you kind of have to come back onto social media. It's a risk for sure because this is where everyone markets. Social media is where we're all talking, but Lush has a pretty big base already, a lot of users, and I think maybe they're trying to cater more to that specific base.
What's interesting about this, too, is there's been so much, and you know this, Callan, you've covered it, I've covered it for various platforms here, the impact of social media on mental health, specifically for younger users, right? And Lush has a demo that they aim for, millennials and Gen Zers especially. And when we think about, mental health awareness as it relates to social media, you have to imagine that regardless of how it works out for Lush from a business perspective, it's a big spotlight. Like, we're talking about it, we're covering it. It's a big spotlight on mental health and how social media affects it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we have been hearing revelations about how much social media impacts young people's mental health, and that is Lush's core demographic. I think they want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And now they're not, like you said, they're not going away completely. They're still going to have customer support on Twitter. They'll be on Pinterest, although Pinterest tends to skew slightly older, is not really for Gen Z. And they're growing their YouTube presence as well. So, you'll still find them online. They're not going offline. They're just going to try to reduce their social media presence.
What I wonder is if we can talk about the T-word trend, might this start one? Because we've seen like Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga, they've done sort of moves in this space similarly, but not a ton of Gen Zers are like buying Balenciaga bags. Like, I'm a millennial, I'm not buying Balenciaga bags. You know what I mean? Different customer base here. Do you think that this could be a start of a trend away, from that luxury space?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
I don't think
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to see, like, most brands are going to continue posting on TikTok. Like Duolingo, for example, the language learning service is like killing it on TikTok. I think a lot of other brands are going to follow that lead rather than going offline. But who knows, maybe a couple other brands will want to follow this lead and try to be more sustainable, as well as trying to protect their users' mental health.
Yeah, listen. Again, anytime we can shine a spotlight on mental health, that's something we want to do here on this show. Callan, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate you joining us on a Monday evening. That does it for this hour. There's going to be a whole lot more Hallie Jackson Now. That's the name of the show. Here for you tomorrow, same time, same place.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.